That is a promise that is written in blood.
Get a grip on yourself, Eunice, or I'll kill you.
When I was about 10 or 11 years old, it was when the television film Eunice was broadcast. Those were the evenings sitting in front of the TV, waiting for the studio laughter to echo. Then Mama Harper stepped out with silver hair tied up a flashy floral dress, a grumpy southern voice shouting at Eunice becoming an unforgettable part of childhood memory. For a small child, I am sure that the dramatic parts were beyond my understanding, but it still left a lasting mark. After that, the film was never released on any home media. Only until the internet era I could watch it again. And it is still astonishingly good. From the scene of Eunice screaming in despair to the moment Mama died silently, then the regretful reunions of the three siblings, all still keep their emotional power after so many years. But the deeper I dug into the behind the scenes, the more strange details I discovered that I completely did not notice as a child. Do you know that Vicki Lawrence almost refused the role of Mama because she was afraid of having to wear a fat suit for life? Or one of the creators of the show was an AIDS patient who was still cryogenically preserved thanks to the residuals from this very series. And also the suffocating decisions where a script almost turned Mama into a woman having an affair with her brother-in-law. Today, we will reopen the darkest and strangest backstage doors of Mama's family. 20. NBC almost let Mama sleep with her brother-in-law.
I wasn't even with her when she died. A cold-blooded nurse just called me up from the hospital and told me like she was announcing a time of day.
Very few people know that in the early days of Mama's Family on NBC, there was a script that almost turned Mama into a completely different character. The episode Mama Cries Uncle was once written with the detail that Mama and her brother-in-law, her late husband's brother, slept together after the funeral. Vicki Lawrence, after reading it, said directly to Joe Hamilton that Mama could not sleep with her brother-in-law. Not because television is solemn, but because Thelma Harper is the type of person that the audience out there understands very well. Hot-tempered, controlling, sharp-tongued, but still keeps the family's traditions. Touching the family's traditions is touching the final boundary of religious families in the Bible Belt. That is why the original dark version never aired. It only exists in Vicki's memoirs and some old drafts. That behind-the-scenes story reminds us that sitcoms in the 80s were not always light-hearted. Sometimes you had to fight to preserve purity, so the audience could still sit in front of the TV every night and smile in peace. That steadfastness is what helped Mama become an icon, not a character stained by overly bold ideas. 19. There was once a dark TV movie where Mama died.
Eunice, will you look at it this way? If we hadn't eaten the damn thing up, he'd be dead by now of old age.
We always consider Mama's Family as a light-hearted, warm sitcom where laughter echoes through family evenings with grumpy but loving Mama Harper. But in reality, before the series officially started, there was a much darker version. On March 15, 1982, CBS aired Eunice. The film was divided into 4 acts spanning 23 years from 1955 to 1978, following Eunice Carol Burnett, the ambitious daughter who wanted to be an actress but was stuck in a terrible marriage divorce and the grip of her mother. Vicki Lawrence played Mama Thelma under the dim studio lights with the tense atmosphere of real arguments, not just gentle satire. By the last act in 1978, Mama died off-screen, leaving the 3 siblings, Eunice Philip Ken Berry and Ellen Betty White, to return home after the funeral. Eunice collapsed, realizing her dream was shattered, her life forever stuck in responsibility and regret. There was no echoing laughter, only the heaviness of unfulfilled dreams, endless arguments between siblings, and the moment Eunice screamed for her mother in real pain. This film was like a dark experiment exploring the tragic depth of the Harper family before shifting to the cheerful sitcom format of Mama's Family. Many viewers, when rewatching it, are still surprised because this is the version where Mama truly leaves and Eunice has to face an unfillable void. That contrast makes us appreciate even more the way the later series chose a light-hearted direction, keeping Mama alive forever in family evenings. 18. Vicki Lawrence was younger than the actors playing her children.
Let's just move him back the number of spaces that I moved him forward.
She's right.
How many spaces did you move it?
Well, how the hell should I know?
I remember the feeling when I first learned that Vicki Lawrence was just over 30 when Mama's Family aired. That sounds almost like a joke, especially when you are used to Mama curly grey hair, a slightly stiff walk, and the way she scolds the whole family as if she has done it her whole life. But in reality, Vicki was only 34 years old when NBC broadcast the first episode younger than most of the actors playing her children. Ken Berry, playing Vinton, was 16 years older than her. Carol Burnett, still the unruly and wounded Eunice, was also 16 years older. Betty White was even 27 years older than Vicki. For an ordinary viewer, that age gap completely disappeared under the wig, the padding and the slightly stooped posture that Bob Mackie intentionally designed. Mama had to live in the body of an experienced person, not just age by costume. Television at that time was different from now, in that people rarely scrutinized real age. Actors could go straight into a role if they felt the character. And perhaps that is why Lawrence said that when she reached Mama's real age, she felt herself younger than Mama on TV back then. A sentence that sounds amusing, but is also proof of a beautiful kind of illusion sometimes age on screen, is decided by the heartbeat of the character, not by the number of years on paper. 17. Harvey Corman hated the role of Ed Higgins.
Mama, this is Ed Higgins. You know, the young man I have been telling you about now for quite some time.
No wonder you've been keeping him under wraps. What have you been doing with my little girl?
Nothing, ma'am. Nothing.
Anyone watching Mama would be impressed by Harvey Corman. The tall man with a wide grin, always appearing as Ed Higgins, the clumsy plumber shop owner who often argued with Mama, but in the end still obediently listened to her. Ed's comedic scenes, from his awkward way of holding a wrench to being scolded by Mama, all seemed very natural, as familiar as a real neighbour. But few people know that behind that smile, Harvey actually did not like this role at all. Harvey once admitted in rare interviews that Ed Higgins was too similar to his real self in life. A clumsy guy, often stumbling, not very successful in both romance and career. He felt the role was like looking into a mirror, and that made him uncomfortable. Every time he entered the makeup room and saw the old workman's outfit and the hard hat, Harvey would sigh. He was still professional, still filmed all the scenes, but deep down he was not comfortable. Instead, Harvey liked guest roles such as Alistair Quint, the eccentric, humorous, unrealistic character, or directing episodes where he could control the rhythm instead of being stuck in a character too close to himself. Vicki Lawrence later recounted that Harvey often joked, half-jokingly, "Ed is me, but I don't want to be Ed forever." That reluctance accidentally created a genuine charm for the character, making the audience love Ed Higgins more than ever, even though the actor himself always wanted to run away from him. 16. Dorothy Lyman flew across America every week.
I worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in New York. Wednesday night I flew out here. And then I worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, rehearsing with y'all. We shot on Sunday, and I took the red eye back and went right from the airport to the studio, got my blocking, took a nap, and, started all over again. It was really the best time of my life.
Do you still remember those scenes where Naomi Harper, the energetic daughter-in-law, golden hair, always trying to keep the peace in Mama's chaotic house, appeared with a bright smile and a warm voice? Dorothy Lyman brought freshness to that character, making the audience fall in love from the very first episodes. But few people know that to maintain that regular presence on screen, Dorothy had to endure an almost unimaginable, grueling schedule. During the entire time Mama's Family was filmed in Los Angeles, Dorothy was also playing Opal Sue Pritchett in All My Children, the ongoing soap opera airing in New York. She had to fly back and forth between the two coasts of America every week, 4 days in Los Angeles with sunshine and lively sitcom scripts, 3 days in New York with the crowded studio atmosphere of soap opera. Continuous flights, heavy suitcases of costumes changing time zones made her body tired, but Dorothy still kept her professionalism. She once called it "all my paychecks," a way to maintain two large sources of income, but also a real physical burden. There were days she got off the plane and ran straight to the set, just having time for light makeup before going on scene. That perseverance helped Naomi become an indispensable part of the Harper family, even though the behind the scenes were sleepless nights and endless long flights. 15. Vicki was haunted when filming on the very same haunted stage.
You mean you don't remember how many spaces you moved that thing just a second ago?
Well, I guess I'm just too stupid ever to grab the goddamn dice up the past.
You may not know, Mama's Family was filmed at Stage 33 in CBS Television City, also the place where the Carol Burnett Show was recorded for 11 years. For most viewers, this was just an old studio, but for Vicki Lawrence, it was a room filled with career ghosts. She once said that stepping onto that stage was like returning home and walking through a cemetery at the same time, because everything was familiar, but no longer the same as before. This was the period when Carol Burnett was divorcing Joe Hamilton, the main producer of Mama's Family. The two did not talk, backstage sides were silent, and Lawrence, who always saw Burnett as a mentor and almost a second mother, was stuck right in the middle. In theory, she was the sitcom star, but in feeling she was filming on the remains of the old show, no more Carol, no more Harvey Corman by her side, no more confident variety laughter of the past. Lawrence admitted that every time she stepped on stage to become Mama, she heard old echoes in the room. And the haunting thing was not ghosts, but the fact that a life stage had ended while the new stage forced her to stand alone to continue. 14. Co-writer Dick Clair died of AIDS.
Honey, I'm home. How about a nice kiss?
Sure thing, sweetie pie.
One of the important names behind Mama's Family actually belonged to someone who rarely appeared in public, Dick Clair co-writer with Jenna McMahon. Clair was the model television writer of the 70s-80s hard-working, skilled, contributed to many famous sitcoms such as The Facts of Life and It's a Living. But his life followed a path almost unknown to the public, and at first the press did not explain thoroughly. In 1986, Clair was diagnosed with AIDS at a time when the disease was still associated with stigma and misunderstanding. What made his case special was that he pursued the right to preserve his body by freezing after death. Clair took the case to the California court and won, creating a legal precedent for cryonics in the US. He died in December 1988 at the age of 57 and was cryopreserved at the Alcor Life Extension Foundation according to his wishes. 13. Vicki's career began from a fan letter.
But Carol had different
I wrote
ideas.
this fan letter. I was entered in a little contest called Miss Fireball, and the gal in the newspaper article said she looks like a young Carol Burnett. So I sent her that article so she wouldn't think I was nuts.
Few people know that the career of Vicki Lawrence, the woman who would later become the icon Mama Harper, began with a simple fan letter handwritten on ordinary paper sent to Carol Burnett in the 1960s. When she was a young girl in Inglewood, California, Vicki participated in a local beauty contest called Miss Fireball. A local reporter commented that she looked exactly like Carol Burnett, who was famous with the Carol Burnett Show. Vicki's mother advised her to write a letter with a press photo telling about the resemblance. Unexpectedly, Carol Burnett actually read the letter. She suddenly appeared at the contest, shocking the entire hall. From then on, Vicki was invited to audition and was quickly cast into Carol's show, starting from a simple fan letter without any connection or big casting call. Just a few years later, Vicki had become an official member, learning from Carol those delicate comedy skills. That letter not only opened the door to her career, but also created a mentor-mentee relationship that lasted for decades. Vicki often retold this story with a nostalgic smile as a reminder that sometimes the most wonderful things begin from the smallest, most sincere gestures. 12. Mama was not originally a Southerner.
Honey, I'm home. How about a nice kiss?
Sure thing, sweetie pie.
In the imagination of most viewers, Mama is always the typical image of the American South drawn-out accent. A slightly sharp tone sometimes mixed with a Baptist church wedding and Sunday dinner with fried chicken. However, in the initial draft by writers Dick Clair and Jenna McMahon, the Harper family was set in the Midwest with a standard Midwestern accent, less colourful and less local personality. The decision to move the whole family to a Southern flavour came from Carol Burnett, who felt the comedy only truly shone when the character carried a distinct cultural context instead of speaking in a neutral television voice. Claire and McMahon strongly objected to this change in the early days, even once walking out of rehearsal when they heard the dialogue read with a Southern drawl. They worried that Southerners would see it as mockery, while other regions would not understand the cultural references. The reality was completely the opposite. The South embraced the Harper family as if recognizing their own neighbors, while the rest of America found a distinctive kind of comedy that was hard to replace. Looking back, this is a rare case where the intuition of a variety show star actually determined an entire cultural space that lasted for decades on television. 11. The show was cancelled, then became the #1 syndication sitcom.
Yeah, it says right here there was no sign of forced entry.
He robbed everything and then cleaned up after himself. He even mopped the floor.
Oh, did he leave that same courteous message?
Yep.
I still remember the early 80s when the broadcast schedule was as fixed as a student's timetable. What you could watch depended on whether you could get home by 7 p.m. or not. And Mama's Family, with all its strange charm, unfortunately fell into the time slot war that few new sitcoms survived. NBC changed the time slot many times, sometimes even pushing the show against Magnum PI, a match not equal from the opening bell. In the end, Mama's Family was cancelled after 2 seasons quietly, like hundreds of other shows of the time. But television never really ends when you turn it off. During the summer reruns of 1985, viewers began to rediscover Mama, this time not stuck between news or football, and the rating was even better than when it was newly aired. The producers looked at the numbers and understood what insiders always knew. Some series do not belong to prime time, but belong to habit. Syndication became the second door, and it fits so well that Mama's Family became the #1 first-run syndication sitcom from 1986 to 1990. Sometimes a show does not fail, it just appears at the wrong time. 10. The friendship between Carol Burnett and Vicki Lawrence once broke. If you are a fan of Mama, you must be familiar with the image of Carol leading and Vicki standing beside her like a promising apprentice, a kind of friendship and mentorship rare on television. Therefore, hearing that the two did not talk to each other for years may surprise you. Everything did not start from Mama's Family, but from the divorce between Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton, the producer of both shows. When Mama's Family returned in syndication in 1986, Vicki agreed to continue the role of Mama while Carol refused to appear. From Carol's point of view, it was like Vicki chose sides. We do not need to dramatise that situation. Adults sometimes fall into silence, especially amongst artists who were once close. What makes the story memorable lies in what happened later. Hamilton died in 1991, and the silence between the two was finally lifted by a simple conversation. There was no grand reconciliation, no talk show, just 2 women who once shared the stage finding a way to talk to each other again. For those who saw both of them standing together under the lights of Stage 33, it was a gentle and age-appropriate ending. 9. Bob Mackie won an Emmy thanks to Mama's costume.
I really never wanted to be a fashion designer. And I still don't really, I do it, but I don't consider myself a fashion designer. I'm a costume designer that's doing that.
Into the history of American television costume, Bob Mackie is usually remembered for the glamorous outfits of Cher or the colourful stage costumes of the Carol Burnett Show. But one of Mackie's most special wins came from something not glamorous at all, the old flowered dresses of a southern mother. When Mama's Family entered the NBC phase, Mackie had to solve the puzzle how to turn a 33-year-old woman into a 65-year-old lady so that the audience would not suspect anything. The solution lay in 3 layers, shape, texture, and habits. Shape was the padding and body frame that increased the focus on hips and belly. Texture was the cotton fabric faded flowers, along with socks shrinking at the ankles. A small detail that Lawrence said was taken from her grandmother. Habits were how Mama moved bent down and put her hands on her hips. When combined, it was not just playing old, but building a whole life. In 1984, Mackie and colleague Rhett Turner won the Emmy for costume design for Mama's Family. A result that surprised many in the industry, a sitcom with flower dresses and low-heeled shoes won alongside the satin lights of Dynasty. That says a lot about the power of costume when it serves the character instead of just serving beauty. 8. Cancelled, then lived longer than the shows that once crushed it. There is an interesting thing that anyone who grew up in the pre-streaming TV era understands: a show does not die when it is cancelled, but when no one re-airs it. For Mama's Family, the irony was NBC brought it to air in 1983. Then NBC itself was the one to close it after only 2 seasons. The constant time slot shuffling, sometimes even being pushed against Magnum PI, made it hard for a small sitcom to survive. By April 1984, the show ended and seemed done. But then NBC continued to air reruns until September 1985. And in the old TV world, reruns revealed the truth who watches when there is no guiding hand. It turned out Mama had loyal viewers. They found the show by schedule without the network's push. What happened next was a move that many later series learned from Mama's Family was freed from the network and switched to first-run syndication in 1986. Local stations bought directly aired every day, sometimes double. 95. New episodes were produced, raising the total to 130 episodes, enough to survive in the rerun cycle for many years. 7. The show almost did not exist at first because Vicki did not want to do it.
Just what are you two trying to tell me, that I should give up?
Well, maybe you've done all you can.
Yeah, face it, Mama, it's a lost cause.
A detail kept secret for a long time behind Mama's Family is that Vicki Lawrence actually did not want to do a spin-off from the start, even though the Mama character was more closely tied to her name than any other role. At that time, Lawrence was only in her early 20s, and transforming into a 65-year-old widow was bearable only in sketches lasting 7 to 10 minutes. But moving to a sitcom meant living a whole year in a grey wig fatsuit and heavy flowered dress under hot lights and a dense filming schedule. For a comedian, it was a kind of career aging earlier than real age, and Lawrence saw that very clearly. Besides the makeup issue, Lawrence worried about another problem that few mention in the sketch. Mama relied on Eunice Carol Burnett and Ed Harvey Corman to create a comedy triangle. In the sitcom, both could only appear as guests, if at all. Lawrence was not sure Mama was strong enough to stand at the centre without them. Only when the TV movie Eunice 1982 proved the Harper family could exist in long form did Lawrence agree to sign. And that very moment the project temporarily escaped being buried right at the script table. 6. Ken Berry played 2 different brothers.
A couple of those special over-easy eggs you make, biscuits, ham, and a waffle.
Then we don't serve that here.
Well, why not? You got eggs, don't you?
Of course we got eggs. What do you think we're putting in the damn blankets?
If you only watched the syndication version of Mama's Family, you might think Mama had only Eunice, Ellen and Vinton. But those who still remember the Carol Burnett Show from the days of wooden TVs will know that the Harper family used to be bigger. In the sketches, Mama had up to 3 sons and none of them stayed for long. Philip was played by Roddy McDowall, intellectual, successful, left the family. Larry by Alan Alda, an artist with a different perspective. And Jack by Tom Smothers, a salesman with all kinds of mild illnesses. In other words, the Harper family worked like a small stage where everyone appeared once and then disappeared. When switching to a sitcom, the writers had to face what television always faces. Long-term maintenance is different from making an impression in 7 minutes. A string of talented guest stars cannot stay every week. So the characteristics were merged into a new character. Vinton Harper, gentle, struggling a bit, naive, moving back to live with his mother. This approach did not make a big noise, but it was very practical. It kept the family energy while reducing the risk from rotating casting. For viewers who watched the sketches, this was an interesting slice. For viewers coming through syndication, it was as natural as returning to your mother's house after a divorce, something Raytown understands very well. 5. The house layout is completely chaotic.
I'm an old woman with a few short years left.
We all know that in the Harper house, there are old wooden walls that feel extremely familiar. But if you look closely, you will see the house's layout is a continuity nightmare that makes longtime fans shake their heads. In the first 2 seasons on NBC, the house had 3 bedrooms upstairs. Mama's room, Fran's room, later became the studio, Sonia's room. Buzz slept in the attic, a storage-filled upper floor. Vinton and Naomi were in a finished basement with wooden walls. Everything was clear, logical. Moving to the syndicated seasons from season 3, the house suddenly shrinks. Sonia and Buzz go to college. The attic is no longer a bedroom, but becomes a storage room. As in the episode where Mama cleans the attic, Sonia's room disappears. Only 2 rooms remain upstairs for Mama and Bubba. The basement changes from a finished room to a half-finished construction with exposed pipes and furnace. The number of bedrooms changes depending on the episode. The attic is sometimes a bedroom, sometimes storage, sometimes does not exist. These errors come from cast changes and script needs, but they create a lively house in a strange way, always changing to suit the story, making older viewers smile nostalgically at the lovely chaos of old sitcoms. 4. Mama once had more children than you remember.
Is the promise that our mama gives to her daughter. That is a promise that is written in blood.
If you only watched the syndicated version of Mama's Family, you would think Mama had only Eunice, Ellen and Vinton. But those who still remember the Carol Burnett Show from the days of watching on wooden TVs will know that the Harper family used to be bigger. In the sketches, Mama had up to 3 sons and none of them stayed for long. Philip was played by Roddy McDowall, intellectual, successful, left the family. Larry by Alan Alda, an artist with a different perspective. And Jack by Tom Smothers, a salesman with all kinds of mild illnesses. In other words, the Harper family worked like a small stage where everyone appeared once and then disappeared. When transitioning to a sitcom, the writers had to face what television always faces. Maintaining longevity is different from making an impression in 7 minutes. A series of talented guest stars could not stay every week, so the characteristics were merged into a new character. Vinton Harper, gentle, unlucky, a bit naive, returning to live with his mother. This approach did not make a big noise, but was extremely practical. It kept the family energy while reducing the risk from rotating casting. For viewers who watched the sketches, this was an interesting slice. For viewers who came in through syndication, It was as natural as returning to your mother's house after a divorce, something Raytown understands very well. 3. Vicki cameoed, without makeup, in Rashamama.
I hope you didn't park your clunker behind my Seville. I have to be out of here in 30 minutes.
It's the first good news I've had all day.
In sitcom history, a lead actor's out-of-character cameo is not unusual, but the case of Vicki Lawrence in the episode Rashamama aired during the NBC season is special because the audience themselves did not realise what happened. This was an episode using a multi-perspective structure, a rare choice for an early 80s network sitcom where a kitchen accident is recounted from 3 different versions depending on the storyteller. Due to time spent on flashbacks, Mama is almost absent in the present-day hospital scenes. Instead of making Lawrence sit in the makeup chair for an hour to fully transform into Mama just for a few frames, the crew had her wear a nurse's uniform and walk across the scene just once. No wig, no padding, no flowered dress. She looked more like a 34-year-old woman in an 80s hospital than Mrs. Thelma Harper. The whole thing was not highlighted in the programme nor noted in the credits and was only confirmed years later in interviews. This is a practical production decision, saving makeup time, reducing performer fatigue, and not breaking the structure of the episode. For the average viewer, the cameo went by like any other medical staff. For those who knew, it was a rare moment where Vicki escaped Mama right within her own show. 2. The show ended because Vicki decided herself to leave.
Maybe we're ready to get in.
Funny, but we'll travel along, singing a song, side by side.
I remember clearly the day Mama's Family aired its final episode in February 1990. There was no sense of farewell, no tears, no retrospective montage. Naomi gave birth to a baby girl named Tiffany Thelma Harper, and Mama's door closed as if it would open again the following week. But then there was no next week. At that time, Vicki Lawrence was nearly 41 years old and had lived in Mama's body for almost 16 years from stage to TV movie, from television series to syndication. Her decision to leave the show was not a career scandal, but more like someone stepping out of a role upon realising time had passed with her. What I remember most is not the ending, but the regular way Mama came to viewers every afternoon, every early evening, sometimes 2 time slots in the same local market. Syndication turned Mama's Family into the kind of show you did not need to follow. Just needed to be there like a TV on in the kitchen while you pour water, or laughter echoing from the living room while someone folds laundry. I always thought that was the gentlest ending a sitcom could have, not forced, not regretful, not stretching for another season just for ratings. Mama was not cancelled, she just retired. And sometimes retiring at the right moment is a kind of victory for the very person who created the character. 1. The strange twist of Vicki Lawrence on the music charts.
That's a night that they hung an innocent man.
If you find it strange for a sitcom actress to climb the Billboard chart, you are not wrong. But that is exactly what happened to Vicki Lawrence more than a decade before Mama's Family was born. In 1973, while the Carol Burnett Show was still at its peak, Lawrence released The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, a ballad full of storytelling not upbeat, pop nor radio-friendly at that time. And then the strangest thing happened. The song shot straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, staying there for 2 weeks. If you ever listened to AM radio back then, you will remember Lawrence's cold but non-judgmental narration. And the final twist made the song a true mini-movie. Afterwards, there was no follow-up, no big album, no tour, no career change. She returned to TV as if that Billboard stint was just an interesting detour. Years later, when Reba McEntire covered it and Quentin Tarantino mentioned the song in Reservoir Dogs, that story was dug up again. A person we remember most for her flowered dress once held #1 on the pop chart. If Mama's Family is her television legacy, that hit song is a piece that made Vicki Lawrence belong to pop culture in a way few could predict. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.